Greetings folks and welcome to the Electromaker Show. This is your midweek roundup of all things Maker and embedded and lovely. Now this week we are looking at a RISC-V Raspberry Pi Zero. It's not from Raspberry Pi, but it's a very cool looking little board. We'll also be taking a look at an ESP32 based audio kit. This is on Crowd Supply, along with a bunch of other cool products and projects from the week. So let's get on with the show. Now, we're beginning this week's show with that RISC-V Raspberry Pi Zero. Now, as mentioned, this isn't actually from Raspberry Pi, this is another MangoPi board. We actually talked about a MangoPi board on Crowd Supply quite recently on the show, but this is the MangoPi MQ Pro, which, as I mentioned, has the Raspberry Pi Zero form factor, and a couple of other things about it that make it not so much unique, but kind of desirable now especially. And this is reported on CNX software, and as you can see, this is very much looking like a Raspberry Pi form factor board. There's a few things about it that are straight off the bat worth mentioning. This is not as powerful as a Raspberry Pi Zero, and it's not even as good value as a Raspberry Pi Zero. As it says here, it can be purchased for around $20 now. It has now showed up on AliExpress as well. I did a quick search before the show. It's around $40 on AliExpress at the minute, and there's only 3 listings. So I'd wait a little while before going on AliExpress just to be sure if you are interested in getting this board. Let's quickly just talk about what it is. As you can see, it's the All-Winner D1 chip. It's a RISC-V based chip, and this comes with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. As you can see, there's also your SD card slot here. This runs the Tina Linux, I believe it is called, which is an OpenWRT based version of Linux, but there's also a Debian build for it as well. And as you can see here, we have a camera connector, 2 USB-C ports, one for host, one is on the go, and a mini HDMI port here as well. If we just spool down, you can see the bottom, and there's another display connector. But yeah, as always, as with CNX software, it's very thorough. All of the details you need to know are right here. And of course, the ubiquitous 40-pin header, which means it will be, as far as I know, compatible with all Raspberry Pi Zero hats. Yeah, I mean, there's not all that much more to say about this. It is exciting because it is a RISC-V board, and it's in a well-known form factor. It's definitely the cheapest, as far as I know, RISC-V development board you can get right now, at least that can do all of this stuff, that has a display, that isn't very much spool it up from your own development board type of thing. I'll leave a link to this in the description, but as previously mentioned, they've said it here as well. The price is around $20. It'll probably be a few dollars more than AliExpress. At that price, it does not compete against the more powerful and better supported Raspberry Pi Zero, but here's the key. It probably won't suffer from the same shortages. If you can't get a Raspberry Pi Zero right now, if you can't get a Raspberry Pi at all right now, and you want a small form factor board and you don't need 3D acceleration or a GPU or anything like that, this board will run Linux, will work with all Raspberry Pi Zero hats and things, I think, maybe, don't quote me on that. And it's just another one of those moments where there's a new board on the forefront. It's kind of cool. I really like the look of this board. I'm very tempted to get a hold of one myself, although I have been curbing my collecting tendencies lately because I have a lot of hardware sitting around by this point that I haven't really got the time to play with. Anyway, I'll leave a link to this in the description of the video. Now, this next section is a bit of a 2-for-1, because Sparkfun recently put out the latest version of their EMG system, which is called MyoWare. This is version 2. And this is essentially the way that you can make your body talk to an Arduino or any other microcontroller. We've talked about a few projects like this in the past. A few of them have shown up on funding websites, but this is particularly interesting because it's a product showcase, but it's also a very in-depth tutorial as to how to get started with these things, and it also brings up a very important point that I don't think is talked about enough when it comes to connecting sensors to yourself and then connecting those sensors to a computer. But before we get to that, let's go through this in order. So first things first, here is the MyoWare muscle sensor, and it is one of the various things that Sparkfun have just updated in this set. So you have the muscle sensor itself. There's also a power shield, a link shield, an Arduino shield, and an LED shield, which presumably is just for getting direct visual feedback for when you're actually out in the field, as it were. As you'll see, a lot of these things have a lot of tiny little LiPo batteries attached to them. And of course, the idea of this kind of stuff is not that you spend all of your time at home plugged into the Arduino and then that Arduino goes into a computer. No, the idea is that you can wear these when you are out and about. The whole point of this kind of stuff is that it is portable. There is a Sparkfun product showcase for them, and of course they are all available. These things will also all be available in the Electromaker store, by the way, just to put that out there. If you want to support the show, you can buy them from us. Now, I'm not really going to go into the tutorial here other than to say it is incredible. If you can see on the right hand side of the screen me scrolling down, you will understand just how much there is here. It goes through every detail of every single one of these little shields and components, what they can do, how you can use them, and then way down here is where you actually get into things like how to attach them to your body, example code for them. Yeah, this is all Arduino IDE compatible. It all can work with an Arduino Uno, as you can see here. But it does mention one thing that I think is super important and something that I haven't really seen mentioned all that much when it comes to DIY, biosensing, EMG, any of this kind of stuff. And that is when you're attaching sensors to your skin, and those sensors are going to be attached to an Arduino, and that Arduino is going to be attached to a computer, there is a risk, however small, that you can actually get an electric shock. As it says here, it's suggested to use an USB isolator to prevent noise in the inputs and safeguard against electrical shock. Now, noise is probably the more likely issue you're going to face here if you're doing any biosensing thing. It actually goes on to say here, if you have a wireless mouse and keyboard, it's worth using that. The muscle sensor is sensitive enough, it can also pick up a signal from the trackpad or the keypad on your laptop when it's running on the power. Another thing it says, by the way, that you could do in order to make yourself safe here is just to use a laptop running on battery power and that's not attached to the wall. But I think it is something important that is not said enough, is that when it comes to biosensing, it's a really exciting thing to do. Attaching things to your body and then attaching those things to an Arduino to gather that information. It's especially exciting for me because I love the concept of data sonification. And I've been doing a little side project where I take fit data, which is actually collected from my watch, turn that into MIDI data and put that into Ableton. The idea of being able to do that in real time and attach biosensors to myself and have an Arduino running Mozzie or whatever, which has a little synthesizer on it, and literally turn what my body is doing into music really appeals to me. But if you are going to do something like this, take this advice here and the advice of many others who have talked about this and do it safely. Don't attach your body to something that is attached to the wall without putting some kind of isolation in between. Anyhow, if you are interested in this, the Sparkfun kit looks fantastic. I haven't had my hands on any of this kind of stuff. I'd love to get a hold of some and have a little fiddle with them, and maybe it's something we can give away on the show in future. No promises, I'm looking into it. But if you are interested in this, these look like a very well put together little set of components, and I will leave a link to this Sparkfun tutorial in the description of this video. If you are enjoying the Electromaker Show, there are a number of things that you can do to help us. The first is to subscribe to the Electromaker YouTube channel. It does make quite a large difference when you are subscribed to a channel you watch rather than not. There's magic in the background and the algorithm and all that YouTube nonsense. And the same goes for being someone who takes notifications for shows. If you click all here, you'll get notifications in the top corner. And as you see, I have notifications from Electromaker here. These are browser notifications and only when you're on the site of YouTube, unless you set them to be otherwise, something I wouldn't recommend. And the final thing is, yes, all YouTubers ask for likes, but if you do like it, please do click that you like it. It lets YouTube know that you like it, and if you like it, hopefully other people who like things that you like will like it too if YouTube decides to show them to them, because they might like it, or something. So those three things you can do on YouTube are free, and if you would take the time to do them, that would mean a lot to me. Also, if you want to support the show financially, we have a shop on electromaker.io. I won't spend much time talking about it here. You can see from the names scrolling across the top of the screen that we stock a huge amount of stuff. We do not have a Patreon. We do not run adverts on our videos. We don't ask for donations, but we do have a shop. So yes, thank you for your time. Let's get on with the rest of the show. It is time once again for the mystery box competition, and if you aren't sure exactly what a mystery box competition is, well, it's a competition where I have a mystery box of things provided by the lovely people at Mouser Electronics, and basically every week I put my hand into the box at random and I give something from the box away at random, and this week I have a development tools kit from Silicon Labs. Oh, we've given away something from these guys before. Ah, wicked. Okay, we've given away one of these on this show before. This is the Blue Gecko Express BGX13P evaluation kit. This is the system on chip from Silicon Labs, which is similar to the ESP32. It's a wireless chip. It's also a system on chip with a bit of built-in power. Let me just see if this is open so I can show you the chip. That is a sealed bag. I'm not going to open a sealed bag. That is for the winner to open. I will find the documentation and we'll take a very quick look at it before we find out who has won this. So here it is. This is the board that is in this box here, but as I said, it's sealed. And it is essentially a Bluetooth 5 evaluation kit. This is the little Silicon Labs chip. The BGX13P is a Bluetooth 5 chip, and this board here has all the things you'd expect from an evaluation board. It has a way of attaching other add-ons from Silicon Labs. I think that's what this edge part here is. And then, of course, there's a USB. It's programmable over USB. You have a couple of LEDs and buttons that are assignable, and, of course, a bunch of nice GPIO. And if you are interested in knowing more about this, I can leave a link to the Silicon Labs documentation in the description. And one of the things I like about this that a lot of these kind of Bluetooth boards have is when you get it, you can just straight away plug it in and run it through the terminal. And there is an app, a mobile app, to allow you to sort of just evaluate how this thing might work and control it over the app. And you can use that app to also perform over-the-air updates. And then there's all of Simplicity Studio and Silicon Labs stuff. I believe that Simplicity Studio is one of the free ones from Silicon Labs. It's an Eclipse-based IDE. I think their toolchain is free. Don't quote me on that. I'm not as familiar with actually getting into the weeds with Silicon Labs stuff as I am with other stuff. But yes, anyway, this is the board that we are talking about. This is the Bluetooth 5 evaluation board from Silicon Labs, and we're going to be giving it away. And how does that work? Well, it's completely at random. I love the idea of this mystery box competition. A box of mystery things that I don't even know what all of the things are in here. I've been very disciplined and not looked inside it. I occasionally catch a glimpse. But yeah, the prizes are randomly sent to us, and we randomly give them out to commenters on the show. You don't even have to say anything specific in the comments for the mystery box prize. We just take all the comments from the previous week's episode and choose a winner at random. And that's what we're going to do right now. And your winner this week is Eduardo Lira, which is kind of funny because I talked about him on last week's show. He's one of the NXP Cup people, one of the teams on the NXP Cup. And with that in mind, I have no doubt you're going to put this little Bluetooth unit to great use. And the comment reads, "We got a shout out. Thanks. New blog episode is coming out soon, and we will be returning to that blog, that vlog, and all of the other vlogs from the NXP Cup in the coming weeks. But for now, congratulations, Eduardo. I'll be in touch with you as to how we can send this board out to you. And yeah, let's get on with the rest of this week's show." Moving over to the section of the show we call Funding Website Things, because we look at things on funding websites, sometimes on Kickstarter, frequently on Crowd Supply, and this week is no different. In fact, this week is quite special to me. If you're new to the show, you might wonder why I always kind of say, you know why I like that, and it's because pretty much since the show has started, I have given almost unfair precedence to audio projects, anything that uses audio, especially things that are sort of synthesizer-based. I was a musician long before I was a tech writer, and now YouTube speaky person. And yes, this is no different. This is the ESP32 audio development board on Crowd Supply. And you may have noticed my eyes flick to the right just to check that I hadn't got that wrong, but that is indeed the name of this project. Quite simply, ESP32 Audio Development Board. A portable, open-source ESP32 powered audio development platform with a touch screen and support for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connectivity. Now, the ESP32 element of this is, of course, quite self-explanatory. They are very powerful chips. They are dual-core, and they have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And the fact, by very virtue of the fact that they are dual-core, it means that you can do quite a lot of things that require work to. Now, the ESP32 element of this is somewhat self-explanatory. Very powerful dual-core Wi-Fi and Bluetooth system on chip. In fact, we'll be talking about them again later on in this very show. They are ubiquitous for a reason. However, I really do like the form factor of this. There's a lot of very handy things you can see here. So, for example, there's the touch screen, which is kind of obviously quite a big thing. We have your micro SD card slot here. But left and right here, you'll notice that these are screw terminals, and that's because you can plug this directly into speakers. That's by virtue of the technology that they're using in order to decode the signals from the ESP32 and produce the audio. So if we talk about that bit first, maybe. So right here, as you can see, a dual I2S stereo DAC, or is it I2S? I always get so confused. I2C, I2S, I2S? If someone knows the definitive answers to that, please correct me in the comments below. But yes, it is a stereo DAC, a Maxim integrated MAX 98537 with a built-in Class D amplifier. And if that sounds familiar to you, it's because the wildly popular little Adafruit breakout boards, which are I2S DACs, which have speaker amplifiers in them, use the exact same chip. In fact, they're used in a whole bunch of different builds. They're really quite fantastic little things for the money. But this is built right into the board. So that means, yes, when you get this board, essentially you can get it and then just plug it into a couple of speakers, as you see here, and you're just ready to go. You could make an entire project with just this board and a couple of speakers using the touchscreen as the input and having the speakers on the side, put it into an enclosure. You could make a visual synthesizer that connects to via Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to get samples off the internet. I don't know, just pulled that idea out of nowhere. So yes, I'm not going to go into too much more detail right now, simply because this is a pre-launch project. It will be launching on Crowd Supply soon. There is a lot of information as to how it can be worked, and I literally just now noticed the battery attachment. That's really cool. Anyway, There's a whole lot of information about how it compares to other boards that are similar to kind of to this, and there will be a miniature version of it too, which looks quite nice as well. This isn't the first ESP32 audio board we've talked about on Crowd Supply. We've featured them on the show before, but this one is interesting. It puts a fresh spin on it, and we'll definitely be coming back to it when it goes live. For now, if you'd like to get that information before I have time, or remember to circle back around to it, you can always enter your details into the box here. Now we're going to talk about a project on the Electromaker website, and usually this is a fantastic opportunity for me to talk about one of our community members. And of course we are now able to celebrate those community members with the Electromaker of the Month competition, where every month people can win prizes from us for their ingenuity. This time it's a little bit different because the project is by, well, me. Yes, this is the long-awaited getting started with Thingy tutorial that I've hinted at a few times. I want to make it very clear. It seems at the minute like this is the Thingy 91 show. I know I've been talking about it quite a lot. It's kind of a complete coincidence. I have a lot of enthusiasm for this board, and then behind the scenes, other things at Electromaker that I have nothing to do with mean that, yeah, we have a competition with the Thingy 91. It's being talked about in the Electromaker Educates video, which is coming out soon. But yeah, it's a bit of a coincidence, really. I just happened to finally get round to sit down and doing the very basic getting started with Thingy tutorial. And so I did make a video to go with it. It's a little bit different to the Electromaker Show. It's a lot less waffling and a lot more focused, just going piece by piece through what you need in order to get the Thingy 91 up and running. But there is also a full written tutorial if you're interested in it. This is not a programming tutorial. If you want to get into developing for the Thingy 91, that's going to come later. I will be doing another tutorial, which is more to do with setting up Visual Studio Code and all that kind of things. This is literally getting the Thingy 91, registering the SIM, putting the pre-made firmware from Nordic Semiconductor on it so that you can get to the point where you are getting lovely data up into the NRF cloud like you can see just here. And as I said at the end of this tutorial, a nice little bonus I noticed is that any data that does turn up in the cloud, you can set a time frame and just download it as CSV files, which is pretty handy because before I get into the weeds of actually doing proper development with the Thingy 91, it's nice to just gather some data from it and do something with that data. And CSV format is something I'm already kind of familiar with. But anyway, this is the first of what I hope to be many projects that I'll be actually finally putting up on the Electromaker website, taking part in the community and maybe helping a few other people learn. If there's anything that you are kind of super interested in seeing a tutorial in this style from, do let me know in the comments of the video, because yeah, it's something that I have to make time for. I have to fit around all of my other work, but I'm so happy to do it that yeah, if you are wanting more tutorials in a similar style, do let me know. Anyway, I will leave a link to this project by Electromaker Ian, whoever that is, in the description of this video. Moving over to the smart knob. Now, this is something that I noticed a while ago. Someone suggested I put on the show a while ago, and for some reason, timing probably, it never actually made it on. So I wanted to put it on now, even though this is now a few weeks old. This is really quite amazing. It looks like a rotary encoder, right? He's turning it around, he's pressing the button, but this uses a brushless DC motor, which means that it can add, well, whatever haptics you want. You can add detents to it, you can have multi-rotation with detents. There's a lot of very interesting things that can be done with it. And the thing I love about it is that this is just a completely open source, open hardware project. You can head to this GitHub description here and get all of the information you need in order to make it your own. I really love the way that these kind of projects are cropping up now. This is a very high-level version of something that we've talked about on the show a couple of times. In fact, the runner-up of last month's Electromaker of the Month simply stuck a rotary encoder on top of a joystick and created an entirely new kind of input system just by combining two simple components. This takes something that is on the surface quite simple, a brushless DC motor and a switch, and turns it into one of the most interesting looking inputs that you can get right now. I mean, what you just did there a moment ago just blew my mind slightly. Like, presses a button, pulls it back, and then yeah, look, that's snapping to the that's snapping to the center. He pulls it, it's snapping back to the center, and oh, that movement's so nice. Okay, I am gushing now. This is a really lovely project, and it represents something that I like so much. This DIY approach to creating new ways of interfacing with technology that feel a little bit more human. We are moving away from analog connections to things, and those big clunky switches you see on things, and that felt so nice. They are going away, and sort of with good reason, because capacitive touch and the various other ways that you can work with things, it's so much harder to break that stuff, and in some situations it just makes more sense, financially as well. But yeah, I love that people are still working on new and interesting ways of combining the old ways input felt to the new things we can do with technology. If there's any projects like this that you see that kind of fit with this, do let me know, because I'd love to sort of put together a collected section of things which fit like this. Maybe an article or something that just talk about 10 cool different ways people are working with inputs and outputs with microcontrollers. This definitely will be high up on that list. Anyway, I've waffled a little bit here, but I'm sure that's not a problem. I will take this link and I will leave it in the description of our video, and you can head over to Scott Baez's channel and watch this video. It is fantastically well explained, and as I previously mentioned, you can head to the GitHub for the project here. It is completely open source. We are now moving over to the Dave's Garage YouTube channel, which is a channel we have featured on the show once before. I can't remember exactly why. It's one I go back to quite a lot. I think a lot of people found his channel while he was talking about Quake 3's inverse square algorithm that makes that game so very quick. Dave's a really interesting person because he's an ex-Microsoft employee, and in fact some of the videos on his channel go into annoying Windows quirks and how they're basically his fault. He is now retired and spends his time maintaining a fantastic YouTube channel. And today we're going to look at his video introducing the ESP32. Now, there are a lot of ESP32 tutorials out there, but I thought this one was definitely worth a mention just because Dave has a very good way of explaining things. He is a very, very experienced engineer. Obviously, he's been working on Microsoft products for time immemorial and is now retired, as I may have already mentioned. But he gives a great introduction into the ESP32 and why you might want to use it. And then as you get through the video, he talks about different ESP32 boards. He uses a couple of different ESP32 boards as examples, including one from M5 Stack, and then as you can see here goes into installing platform IO and talks about why you might want to use the Arduino toolchain for ESP32 rather than Espressif's own SDK. It's just a fantastic project, and as it says, yeah, you can learn the ESP32 in 15 minutes, and this is a very basic getting through and hello world and getting it all working. One of the things I really love about the way Dave does stuff is that he's not scared to make mistakes during his tutorials, and I think that's very valuable because if you make a mistake during a tutorial, you fix that mistake. And if you fix that mistake in front of your audience, then your audience learns how to fix that mistake if they come across it. So many beginner tutorials give you just the information you need to get going, but if you run into any snags and you're a beginner, then you have no idea what to do. But yeah, this is one of many channels. This is one of many videos on Dave's channel that I really like. Dave's Garage is probably a channel some of you guys know already. But yeah, if you got yourself an ESP32 and it's been sitting there and you haven't really thought what you want to do with it, this is a fantastic way to get up and running with it. Dave is a very easy to follow person, yeah, just a solid ESP32 tutorial, which I will leave a link to in the description of this video. Moving on to what might not seem like much of a news story, but given how long Pi was the default username on the Raspberry Pi operating system, it sort of is. It's an end of an era. Raspberry Pi has now ditched the default Pi username. Now, as you may remember, for a long time, for time immemorial, Pi was the default username. In fact, for most of the Raspberry Pis I spooled up in my early years, Pi was the default username, Raspberry was the password, and to my shame, I never changed those things. And that is exactly why this change has come. Because, in short, having a singular username for all of these different devices is a massive security risk. So what happens now is when you first boot a Raspberry Pi, it boots into the Pi OS wizard, which is actually a separate environment from the desktop environment, and you must create a new username and password at this stage. Now, if you work with headless setups, don't worry, you're still covered. In the Raspberry Pi Imager, you can set a username and password ahead of time as well. This also works for Raspbian Lite. No, it's not called that anymore. Raspberry Pi OS Lite. If you are loading the light version of the OS but you do have a screen, you will get a terminal version of this wizard setup. And again, you can always do this by putting a file in the boot sector that has all of those details in as well. There are many tutorials about that. For a bit more detail than the news post that I've written here, you can also head out to the blog that I linked in the news post, and this is just a report from Simon Long as to why they wanted to go through and make these changes. Yeah, as I mentioned, it already goes through all of the different ways you can do this. And one other thing that is worth mentioning, it says in the same blog post, they now have some experimental support for Wayland, which is a different Windows system from the X Windows system. If that's something you're interested in looking into, you'll find more information in this blog post, but be warned, it is experimental. Finally this week, a wonderful article on Hackaday about the Trenton Computer Festival, which is the oldest computer festival in the world, not necessarily the best known, but yes, the article itself goes into a wonderful amount of detail about this, what looks like a wonderful event. It's not an event I've been to in person, and I doubt I'll ever be able to. It's the wrong part of the world for me. But yes, there's so many wonderful images here that just excite me in various ways, and the write-up goes into just everything from the talks that they have there through to what happens on the floor. I found this to be a really interesting device. There's a video of this separately I managed to find, which is this is a beanbag hurling machine made by some school kids. They also had a talk from that guy who's been making his own semiconductors at home, and I forget his name, Sam Ziluf. Yeah, if you haven't heard of this guy, he's fascinating. But why am I telling you about a computer festival that you can't necessarily go to unless you're in the right part of the world? That's because finally, after so many years of running and so many talks that were never recorded until recently, they've started recording their talks and putting them on YouTube. So, like so many in-person festivals, they also had to deal with being remote during the pandemic and the ongoing pandemic. And so they are actually now well set up for recording talks. It just happens naturally. And as you can see, there's a huge amount of information now on this YouTube channel, all the talks from here, and there's just such a huge variety of different kinds of talks. It seems so open, but also so focused at the same time. I massively suggest that you head to the Hackaday article in the description. From there, you can find links out to the Trenton Computer Festival website, which in and of itself is a very fascinating website talking about the history of the computer fair and all that kind of stuff. And of course, the YouTube channel for a massive amount of talks. It just goes on and on and on. And presumably there's going to be a huge amount more added to it. I don't even know where to start with this, but I feel like this is what I'm going to be watching instead of the television that I don't own for quite some time. So that is the end of the Electromaker Show for another week. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for all of the support you are showing this show, be it by subscribing on YouTube or buying things from the shop, and especially by getting in touch and telling me your feedback. Recently, I've had a bit of an uptake in people actually reaching out to say what they love about the show, some things they don't like about the show so much, things they'd like to see on the show. And it's just wonderful. It's just wonderful to hear such direct feedback about the show. I love reading all of the YouTube comments, but comments that are actually specific are just wonderful. And again, as I've said before, my email address is ian@electromaker.io. If you want to send me an email just to maybe say a bit more at length what you like about the show or not, or how much you hate it when I say please email me, you can do that. Anyway, that is a show for another week. I will be back with you next time with more information, more giveaways, all of the stuff that we love doing here at Electromaker. But for now, I hope you have a safe, fun, and creative week, and I'll chat to you next time.